Good evening. Welcome to the January 10th meeting of the PACE Review Committee. We'll start out this evening with a roll call. Jim Bartlett,
Steve O'Rear.
Kara Fox.
and we've got a little bit of new business. We need to elect a new chairman for this year. Do we have any nominations?
I'll nominate Jim Bartlett.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we need a vice chair.
I'll nominate my other neighbor down here, Mr. O'Rear.
I'll second that. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Before we get into reviewing the applications, I believe there's some discussion we need to have regarding the target areas.
Yeah, you each have a copy of the proposed map for 2023. City staff is proposing to create two target areas, one in the Walnut Street district, which is one of our current target areas since 2020, and then the second on the Hilltop in the Pinehurst area.
Okay.
Do we need a motion?
So do we need a motion for that?
Probably wouldn't hurt.
Okay.
I move we accept it.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that passes. We have a couple of applications that are amendments to prior applications that had already been approved. The first one being 1001 West First Street. Is anybody here to speak to that?
Yes. Ryan Rogers, my address is 804 East First Street.
Tell us about the amendment that you're doing.
What we found when we tore into the building is, our intention was to replace the first floor. It had actually given away and broke in the middle, but we intended to salvage the second floor. The building was very structurally deteriorated. Once we pulled everything out, we found that all the floor joists were rotted into the brick. So our intention was to sister those floor joists, and they were just in too bad a shape. So we ended up pulling the floor system out and replacing it. It was added to Prickett Properties contract. They didn't charge us any additional for the floor joist, of course, but we had to frame the first floor walls in order to support the floor, because you can't run new joist into the old joist pockets and make them strong enough. The other thing that we found is, as we demoed the inside of the walls, there was a lot of tuck pointing that was required. So we had a mason come in, tuck point everything on the inside of it just for structural, not for cosmetic. And then all the headers, they have masonry headers on the outside of the windows, but the inside were wood. And just like the floor joist, that building had sat empty for so long that moisture had got to everything, and all those headers were rotted. So I had to have steel headers replaced in there, and that was one of the first items. There should be a letter that we provided with additions to the work that we needed to do. And I think that, there was a coal chute, and actually, it was thought that that was the original entrance to the house was to the left side. What we found is the header that was there was the old coal chute, and when we demoed all that out, that header fell out, all the bricks started falling out under the window, and it was deteriorated all the way down to the bottom of the foundation, so we had to go in and lay block, put a new put a new sill underneath the window and everything to support it. So it was just stuff we uncovered as we did our demo.
And the original amount of the grant was, 22,445?
I believe so.
Okay.
I don't have that with me.
Jim,
And
that is the correct amount for the
All right.
original.
so your project cost went from,
It went up to 53,402.50 is what we have on the application.
53,402
Yeah,
from approximately 45,000?
yes. 44,888,
Okay.
44,890.
So we're talking a difference of $3,555.
Yeah, I don't know whether you've driven by the building, but we're also finding as we're removing the paint on the outside that, there was a lot of caulk used instead of mortar.
It can be surprising what's underneath the
Yeah,
outside dressing sometimes.
the good thing is John's making the investment to make it right.
And it sounds like you all are doing the proper repairs to make it last much longer.
We're trying.
Okay. So we need a motion to, approve making the recommendation to the board of, to extend this out to 25,000, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. All right. Do either of you have questions?
No.
It's all straightforward.
All righty. Do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion that we make the amendment to, it's to the full 25,000 on 1001 West First Street.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else we need to do there?
No, so, their proposal will go to the Board of Public Works on Monday, and they'll do the formal approval of that increase, and I will, probably shoot you guys an email
Okay,
on that.
great. Thanks again.
Okay. And we've got an amendment for 111 West First Street as well.
Each second?
I'm sorry, 111 East Second Street. Do we have anybody here to speak to that amendment?
Well, I don't know if you want to kind of chime in on this one.
Okay. Tell us who you are and what your address is.
I'm Matt Chandler, and the address is 111 East Second Street.
Okay, now, your amendment is to change the type of grant from a regular grant up to a dilapidated structure grant, correct?
Yeah.
Nicole, this will have to be rescored, will it not?
It doesn't have to, since it's already been issued funding. It's completely up to the board. To give you a little bit of background, the only reason they didn't apply for the dilapidated structures originally was because they had already corrected some of those structural issues that made it dilapidated. But based on their investment, you can tell, their initial application, the private investment was over 700,000 compared to the PACE grant.
Okay. So tell us about the project overall.
Well, it's a big project. So it's the 10,000 square foot building that used to be a livery converted to a bottling works and then was a warehouse for the Madison Courier.
Mm-hmm.
The building had some structural challenges, especially in the floor joists, and I wish kind of Brian Martin is our contractor. He could speak a lot more to it. But beyond the facade, the restoration of all the windows, whole new, I don't know, I can't really speak to all the specifics, but windows, doors, reconfiguration of a lot of the interior, exterior, a lot to stabilize the building, a lot of concrete foundation work that had to be completed. You know, I could speak better if Brian was here to help me, but there's been a lot of big investment put into this project, you know, to make it the boutique hotel that it's going to be here in the spring.
And I'm looking at your cost here. Your project cost looks to be about $535,000.
Well, the total investment will be about 1.5 million.
Oh, okay. And you're looking for basically the grant to be upgraded to a $25,000 grant.
Correct.
So, very small percentage of the overall project. Okay. Questions?
I have no questions.
Sir?
None.
Okay. And I've driven by, it looks very nice from the outside.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
I make a motion that we upgrade it to a dilapidated structure grant with an award of $25,000.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks for your investment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, those are the amendments that we had. So now we're ready for current grant applications. We'll start with 217 to 219 East Main.
My name is Shannon Ramosi. My home address is 419 South Zor Church Road in Madison. My family purchased the building that is the former Masonic Hall. And the previous owner had done a lot of renovation. We are finishing off the project by restoring the windows, which the exterior windows are rotted and need repainting. There is some foundation issues on the front facade where it's crumbling and needs to be removed and reinforced. It's just a small curb at the front of the building. There's also a fire escape that was added in the original renovation that is now needing to be repainted because it is rusting and deteriorating.
It's on the exterior, on the back
It's on the
side.
exterior backside, yes. So, we're looking for grant to help take care of those expenses.
Okay.
And, I submitted 3 different estimates, and the project is roughly around a $20,000 project to complete the repairs.
Okay.
We did already restore the windows on the front of the property facing Main Street. We did that as soon as we purchased the property. So those have been addressed. It's just the alley facing wall and then the back wall of the building.
And all of the, well, you're restoring the existing.
Correct.
So all of the work you're doing is past muster with the historic board and,
Well, when I spoke with Nicole and also the historic preservationist, she said that I wouldn't have to do that in order to do the restorations I needed to
you're
do.
doing like for like.
Right.
Okay. And this project, that's a pretty good sized building.
It is.
Is it going to be, what's the purpose going to be for the building once you're complete?
Well, we're gonna keep the street level units as retail space. We're intending to make the second floor office suites that will be for lease. And then we're considering doing an event center in the 3rd floor because there's 2 large rooms in the 3rd floor. One is like a grand ballroom. And the other one is just another large space, but not quite as grand. So that's what we're considering for that space, but it hasn't been completely determined as
Okay.
of yet. The current tenant occupies one of the Main Street level stores and the second and third floor. He's in the process of moving out of the second and third floor, and I anticipate that he'll be out of those levels within the next 60 days. I have to say that the previous owner did an amazing job restoring the building. From what I've heard, its original state was compared to what it is now.
I know the previous owner had done a lot of work in there. Yeah, this is gonna sound like a silly question, but I've gotta ask it. In the course of the work that you're doing, are you uncovering any original features to the building that hadn't been visible before?
Not that, not on this exterior work, because all we've done is remove paint and replace rotted wood. So, no.
Okay. Folks?
Very good. I don't have any question.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Do we have anyone here to speak to the 212 East Street?
Yes, my name is Troy Hedges. I'm the Executive Director of the Jefferson County Youth Shelter, and that is the current address of the youth shelter for the county.
Okay.
And we're applying to get a grant for some gutter helmets for the shelter. Each year, we have to clean the gutters out twice a year for the shelter, and we were using a company out of Cincinnati by the name of Fish that would come down and clean out the gutters, and they no longer come down, so we've been doing that locally. But even in the process of cleaning the gutters out twice a year, we've still had problems with the rain and everything, with the south side of the building where it gets water damage, things like that. And we looked at it and we felt that gutter helmets would help this process and everything to avert the water away from the shelter. Each time the damage, we have to shut the certain bathroom on that south side of the building down, and that sort of prohibits us from taking children, and so it sort of hurts the shelter from taking kids in for a little while and everything till we get that repaired. And so we're trying to alleviate that problem the best we can. Also, there's a point tuck as a project on there also, but the project for that was also to sort of help that area that was water damaged and everything. But our main concern is the gutter helmets for the shelter.
And the project overall is about $23,000.
Yes.
And you're asking for 7,500.
Yes.
In that direction. Is that south side on the alley?
Yes. I think it's a street, that's what they determined it as. It looks like an alley, but
Yeah.
they informed us it was a, excuse me, they informed us they were a street.
And I guess I should have explained this when we first started out. I neglected to. I apologize. The way this process works, of course, we get information from you, and along with the applications you've turned in, we have these matrices that have points, score points, for the various questions we ask. And frankly, we also, along the way, ask other questions that may not necessarily apply to the score. But then at the end of the day, the average score from the 3 score sheets gives the score of that project. And there's a minimum score, and if you're above the minimum score, then you qualify. Then based on funding that we've got available, we make a recommendation to the Board of Public Works, yay or nay on the individual application. And it's actually up to the Board of Public Works to approve the application at the end of the day. There's no need for any of you all to go to the Board of Public Works meeting. You'll be notified after the meeting. But that's the process that we go through here. Do you have any additional questions? Questions? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, 308 East Third.
My name's Eric Shuck, 308 East 3rd Street. Mine's not near as big as some of them other projects. It's just the front door. But it is facing right on East 3rd Street, and the only thing that holds it closed right now is a dead bolt that we don't even have a key for. The old hardware is worn out. It's drafty. Pretty sure it's an original door.
Okay, and so the cost of the project's about $7,000,
Yeah,
$7,040.
right.
Okay, and the replacement door is been approved by, with
Yes,
the
by this- yeah, by this
historic board?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. That's your residence?
Yes.
Questions?
Done.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, 110 West Main. Do we have anybody here to speak to that project?
My recommendation is to move it to the end of the meeting and see if they show up towards the end.
We can do that. Okay. 906 East First. Any objection?
Nope.
Brings us to 223 West First Street.
We're J Rock Properties, 5127 West Interstate Block Road. Alan and Leslie Jackson is her name.
Okay. And tell us about your project.
It's gonna be an Airbnb. It's really close to Centennial Park, and we can see the river. We're hoping to make it a wheelchair accessible one, because there's not a lot in town that are wheelchair accessible. It's gonna be a 2 bedrooms, 2 bath. It's gonna be a cute little Airbnb.
Okay. And in terms of exterior work, looks like you're replacing the siding that's on there.
Yes.
And looks like some windows,
Just one.
just one window with the cladding.
Yes, wood window.
Okay, anything else going on there?
We're replacing the guttering as well, just because it's deteriorated, so that would be it. The siding is severely rotted. They've done a nice job, but several coats of paint over it to kind of hide it, but it's, when you get underneath, it's just, you can actually crumble it with your fingers, so.
What will the use of the structure be when you're done?
Our plan is to make it an Airbnb.
How long have you all owned that property?
Less than a year.
Less than a year?
Yeah.
Yeah, our plan is to have,
Questions?
yeah, our plan is to have it completed by spring, so.
By spring? Okay.
None.
Okay. You ready? Thank you all very much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Okay, we have a couple of projects here that we have already heard presentations on. 128 Mulberry and 752 Jefferson.
I'm here for 752 Jefferson, if you have any other questions.
Well, because we've already heard the presentations, they've already been scored. I would move that we go ahead and utilize the existing scores there.
Do we need a motion for that?
I've made a motion.
I'll second it then.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. There's actually 3 projects there. I should have mentioned the third one is 524 Walnut Street. So, so that brings us to 618 East Second.
David Nato. Paul and Walter, 618 East Second Street.
Okay.
And we were here last meeting from last year, so we'd already been to the board before. And you ran out of money last year, so
Okay.
we're looking at scraping and painting and repairing sills and trim work and tuck point and painting the building.
I'm sorry, did you say you were here at the last meeting?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Excuse me.
Okay.
They had altered their PACE application. They took some things out, which is why I asked them to
Okay.
come to this meeting.
Okay, all right.
That rings a bell.
All right. So the items that are actually part of the application this time, I presume from that the last time there were a lot of things listed that weren't actually part of the PACE project.
They were asking for funding for a couple other items. They've since changed their application slightly to include
Okay.
what you have before you.
All right. So we're looking at, scrape caulk pine, paint, tuck pointing, and prime and paint the brick walls.
That's correct, yes.
Okay,
One of the projects from last time we've already completed, the replacement of the siding, the vinyl siding.
uh-huh,
We went ahead and completed that part of the project.
okay, so
The
that's
original.
not represented here at all, good.
That's already been completed.
And on the other project before, we were looking at doing some window repairs, replacement as far as storm windows, stuff like that, but we took that on.
We'll do
Okay.
that next time. That'll be the third project.
All right. So your cost on this project is $20,000?
That's correct.
Okay. How long have y'all owned that property?
A little more than a year, well, almost, it was a year last October we purchased the property.
Okay.
We put over 200,000 in it already.
And when all's said and done, what's your goal for that property?
It's a bed and breakfast right now.
Be a
It's
B&B?
butterfly house. And we live in the back part of it. There's 3 suites we rent out.
I'm sorry?
There's 3 suites we rent out. We live in the back part of the property.
Okay, so it's also your residence
That
as
is
well?
correct, yes.
I'm done.
We good?
I'm done too.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks, guys. Thank you.
Is there
those are the two, yeah. Okay. 523 to 525 West Street.
Good evening. Marilyn Hantz, 10791 South US 421, Madison, Indiana. And this is Gary McGinnis. He's going to be doing the work in my house.
Before we get started, make sure you're using this score sheet.
Which one?
The dilapidated.
Yep.
Which one?
The dilapidated.
Okay. Yeah. Thank
We
you.
got out of order on those other ones.
The ones we already approved,
Right.
right?
I'm sorry, a little housekeeping on this
that's
end
fine.
here. Make sure we use the right one. Okay. All right, so tell us about your project.
Well, it used to be part of the hospital. It was office building,
Uh-huh.
and it had been vacant for a long time. And so it came available, so I purchased it to be a second home for when my family comes visit. They like to come to Madison and tour everything. So anyway, it needs a lot of work, and Mr. McGinnis is gonna help explain, because I'm not the,
I think one of the biggest things is gonna be the exterior, the tuck pointing painting. I don't know if you guys been by those, you probably have been, because everyone from Lisa Hammock to Brian
Right.
Marshall, we've all same group.
Yeah.
But, it's probably the worst of the ones that we ended up with, but it was a duplex, it's gonna be single now. And just like the front door, there's an old metal front door on the south side. We're in the process of getting one replicated that matches the other one. So we want to go back the way it was.
yes,
But
take
the
it back.
tuck pointing was quite a big cost, and painting, of course, is gonna be big. We've already had a new roof put on it. There's like a 6-foot wide box gutter up there that had give way. I mean, the second floor, it's all gonna have to be redone. Floor joists in the pockets. We're gonna take off a lot of plaster and do a lot of tuck pointing on the inside also. Because you know how the old lime is, it just gives away, it's gone. So there's gonna have to be a lot there. So it's pretty much gonna be from the ground up, and she's committed to put initially 250,000 into, not including purchase price. So it's gonna be a pretty good project. It's roughly 5 months. You know how things go. It's
Oh,
probably
yeah.
gonna be 7, you know, so.
Absolutely. And so you're replacing, you're replacing that side door with one that matches what would have originally been there.
Yes. There's actually a guy by Cross Plains that does that, Country Creations. He's Mennonite Amish or something like that.
Any other examples of taking it back to the original?
All the windows, I'm 99% sure I'm gonna save every window that's there. Even the one that looks like it's fallen in, I've already got it braced so I don't lose it. But I think I can save every window in that building.
And we want to save the molding on the outside and everything,
Yeah,
keep
every
it
bit of it.
looking original.
You have to redo any of the molding?
If you do, you won't be able to tell it. Because I replicate pretty good too.
Was it ever deemed unsafe?
I don't think so, no.
Give me a ballpark. How long's that thing been empty?
I think since 14.
At least.
Yeah, I think all of them was around the same time, and that's what Lisa and Brian and I talked about. 14, I think, is when they was empty. Or vacated.
Yes, they left everything in there.
And when you get this done, it's gonna be a second residence?
Yes, for my family, when they come visit to town.
can't, is there an entrance back to the old hospital on the side?
There is an
Or is it
entrance
just
on the
face
side.
the street only?
There's one on both sides.
Isn't there a driveway?
There's one in the alley, there's
Right.
an entrance there, and then there's, looks like an old duplex facing
Right.
West Street.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
So thank you.
Thank you.
So, that one's a heavy-duty undertaking.
It is.
All of those. Now we're back on rehab room.
Let's see. 524 is another one of those that's,
Oh, yeah.
we've already heard.
So we'll skip that. Do Fifth Street,
I think that's that one.
Springdale.
So that brings us to 600 West Fifth Street, Springdale Cemetery Association.
Good evening. I'm John Musil with Springdale Cemetery Association. I'm the Secretary Treasurer. Springdale is a 501c3 not-for-profit cemetery or entity that the duty of the organization is to run the cemetery, maintain the cemetery grounds, keep cemetery records, and so on and so forth. It takes a lot in our operating budget just to maintain, mow grass, and take care of normal maintenance and cemetery records and so on and so forth. So one of the structures on the cemetery grounds is a chapel that was built in the 1930s. And it was built by Harold Lorig, and it was funded by private donations at the time. And over that 80-90 year period of time, between vandalism and different factors, there's a lot of water that runs off the hillside and goes into the basement and so on, that the cemetery, or the chapel rather, has fallen into disrepair.
Okay. And John, can I interrupt you just for a moment?
Yeah.
Because once again, we've got this little piece of
That's why it's on.
paperwork. We got to make sure we got the right score
That's
sheet
okay.
out.
Just as long as you give me a high score. Get the right one.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. I'm sorry. I apologize
okay.
for interrupting you.
Anyway, the chapel has fallen into disrepair over the years. It's got 5 stained glass windows. It's got a tile roof. It's stone structure. Beautiful building, but it just needs a lot of love to get it back into shape. Our project is estimated at about $65,000. A breakdown of that basically is that the stained glass windows are a large part of that cost, in that it's about $24,000. We've hired Rhonda Deeg, or she's given us an estimate to do the replacement of all the individual broken stained glass pieces and to reset them into the frames and so on and so forth. So that's about $24,000. Then I've talked to Madison Iron Works with Doug Helton. These stained glass windows are in metal frames, and when the stained glass, the windows go out for repair, then they'll be able to inspect it to see if the metal frames have rusted, need rebuilding, cut out sections, whatever that might be. And he estimates that that could be a couple of $1,000s a window, so there's $10,000 more dollars. We've worked with Glass Unlimited to design, I call it plexiglass, but that's not what it is, some type of basically a storm window and a protective window on the exterior that would have proper ventilation to let the stained glass windows.
Have you
survive.
discussed that ventilation with Rhonda, by the way?
Well, that's, yeah, she's got the end of the
Good.
approval of
Yeah,
that. It could
yeah.
be that if that doesn't work, then we're gonna have to go to some other type of storm window that
Yeah.
would probably work, but but we want something
Yeah.
to protect it and to preserve it, because, you know, if you go to all the effort, obviously, to do all this work, you wanna take care of it. So that's about $5,000 roughly. Then the end goal, I didn't mention, the basement's full of water. There's a hillside from the north to the south that flows down through there. There's no adequate diversion of the water. It goes into the basement. So it just needs some love. It's something that in our ordinary budget we can't do. So if we can get outside sources of funding, then we're gonna create an asset for the cemetery and for the community, because eventually it could be used for, burial services there if there's bad weather. Cremations have, increased in, funeral business, so there could be, cremain services there, memorial services, veteran services, things like that. I don't know what it would be, but it could be used to the general public for, for something that would be available for those types of things.
How long's it been since that building was actually used for anything?
Long time. I've kind of been there for 20 years or so, and it was similar, it's worse now, but I mean, it was not usable then. Then we would spruce up the interior, so it has to have better lighting and, so on and so forth. You have some pictures there, but it's a beautiful building. It's got,
Yeah.
High pitched cathedral, ceilings in there, wood, clad and so on. But I think that it would help the cemetery, help the cemetery, because potentially, if we can get it back into shape to use it for some of these things, then we might be able to get some revenue to help with maintenance. It would help the community because it's part of the history of our community.
Yep.
In that cemetery that's been there since 1839, and it would be available then for, uses that we're not looking at purely as a profit-making thing. We're looking at it as something that can be an asset and something that can be used as it was, designed to be used all those years ago.
We walk through there often. It's a beautiful place.
Yes.
And it's a
I'd be glad to
beautiful
take you
building.
down to take a look at the inside too, because most people, when they see the inside, they really
Oh, I had no idea.
are surprised that,
Yeah.
how nice well, it's dirty and needs cleaning.
Gorgeous though. Yeah.
Things that it needs to be tightened up with the windows so that the weather stays out and so on, but it's quite a structure. We're hopeful that we can get enough donations. I think we're lucky with some of those bids that where we're at. I was very pleased that it wasn't more than that, because a lot of stained glass window repairs can be extremely expensive. These stained glass windows they're nice windows, but they're not ones where you got like a picture of a lamb with Jesus, or, pictures of buildings or churches or crosses, things like that. They're just purely colors of, glass thing. They're pretty, but but also that makes it easier to restore.
Well, I will say, in a personal opinion, I shouldn't express personal opinion, but on the stained glass, you're talking to the right person,
Oh, yeah.
talking to Rhonda.
Absolutely.
So. Do you have any other questions?
Nope.
Well, I appreciate your
Yeah.
consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Sorry.
Do you consider unoccupied? What? Do you consider that unoccupied?
I did.
You did? It's not able to, it's not able, okay. I'm just used to people living in buildings. Yes, okay, so never mind, strike that question.
And so how would you mean occupied?
Yeah, and living, okay, never mind.
That is not used.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna use that same score sheet, it looks like, for 526.
Is that a rehab? Which one is that? My instance, dilapidated. Another pages.
anybody here to speak to 526 Walnut Street?
Five 526 Walnut Street, Mark Viterna with Madison Unlimited LLC.
So Mark, tell us about the project overall.
I bought it last year. The plan is hopefully to sell it as a single-family residence. It's an investment property for me, but would prefer not to rent it. I think we probably have too many rentals already on Walnut, and would like to see some of the street maybe have more pride in ownership, I think, if we sold it. So that's kind of what I'd like to see. I'm also a broker in town, so it's kind of in my best interest as well, you know, to get it on the market and improve some of those properties. And I heard 524 was also a PACE application, so I'm glad to hear that. I was about to fall over on my building, I think. So yeah, it's a total gut. It's almost in the same shape as 524. It's about to collapse from all the termite damage over the years. It has some, it's not really too historically important from what I could tell from my research, but, you know, it does have some elements that we would like to save. The second floor has what appears to be maybe some of the original wood flooring that we might be able to salvage. The first floor, the flooring's gone. There's no salvaging it. As well as an original staircase inside that's pretty nice, and some of the trim pieces as well from the second story are in pretty good shape. First floor is pretty much a loss, unfortunately. So the focus right now is just to kind of salvage the building. Like I said, most of the grant money is going to be eaten up with just rehabilitating the structural issues with the termite damage. If the siding that's underneath the original or the existing siding now is of good enough in good enough condition, we would love to salvage that, but we've not looked underneath it, so we can't really tell. The termite damage worries me a little. If it was original wood cladding, it may not be salvageable, but the wood flooring on the inside and the staircase look pretty good from, you know, what we saw. And from what I can tell, it looks like originally I thought it was vacant for about a year, but I did a little more research, and it was a bank-owned property, and it was on the market for longer than I thought. It was on the market for about 9 months before we bought it last year, and then it was under foreclosure for some time. So we think it's probably been vacant for about 3 years now, at least, at a minimum. There was some evidence of squatters when I first bought the place, but got it locked up and haven't seen any evidence since then, so hopefully that's not going to be a continued problem for us. But we'd like to get started right away, so hopefully it won't be sitting around and adding to the blight on that street.
Okay, so I see a few things in the worksheet that don't normally fall in our purview. Plumbing, HVAC, and electric don't normally get covered in the PACE grants. Insulation would not normally be covered. It doesn't make a huge difference, but it does make a difference. Am I missing something there?
Electrical is covered in the dilapidated structures grant. They are allowed to rewire. It's just not the fixtures themselves.
Yeah, because we have to, when we take all those studs down, all of that has to come down with it. So unfortunately, the termite damage is what causes the rerouting. It's not actually an electrical upgrade. It's got, you know, within the last 30 years, Romex, you know, it's not original, you know, knob and tube or anything, but unfortunately with all that structural damage, all that has to come down. And same with the, some sort of insulation will have to go back because the lath and plaster is not in sufficient condition to salvage in the building. So something's gonna have to go back to add some sort of insulation value there. But I think I might have those switched. I think I have 0 down on line 7, and that should be, because I remember we did one other PACE project before that, and we did add the rerouting of the lines to that one. But I think I have it on 0 here for item 7, so that's.
You do in fact have it as a 0.
That's a typo there.
Okay.
then we still strike this, we're still
in that
We're still
ballpark.
in the, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you see that from the alley?
Can you see the home from the alley?
Well, the project, is there an alley that?
There's no alley between the two
Right,
houses,
okay,
no.
yeah.
The house is visible from Walnut Street.
Right.
Well,
Unless that one next to it comes down to Davis.
Yes.
Well, hopefully it comes down in a planned fashion.
Now, you haven't mentioned doors or windows here.
So the front is actually all vinyl windows, unfortunately. When I spoke with our historic preservationist, Lastbrook Peach, I was under the impression that if the materials in place were already there, we might be able to move forward on a vinyl window. And the only reason that we're considering that approach is because the delay in back orders for the aluminum clad windows are still about anywhere from 4 to 6 months out. In addition to just being, 3 times the cost, the vinyl would be something that we could get in there quickly. But hopefully if the original door, actually I've been so busy with things, I haven't really paid attention to the original door. I don't think there's much value there, so we'll probably be upgrading that to probably a wood door. I think right now it's a metal door of sorts, but really anything that's able to be salvaged, that's always our plan, because we live downtown ourselves, my wife and I, we did our home with Pace Grant back on 3rd Street, and, we always try to save everything we can.
So worst case scenario, you're going back with like material.
Yes. With the exception of the windows and the back part of the structure was an addition, at some point, I don't know what year, and that back portion was, shingles, which we'd like to, keep the back portion of the addition since it's not a historic to the structure. But if the original metal roof can be salvaged, we're gonna try that, and if we can't salvage it, then standing seam, and I'm assuming we would need a COA for replacing standing seam with another standing seam. But we would try to salvage the original, but it looks pretty rough from the street, and the rear roof has collapsed, so we don't know about the integrity of the existing standing seam, but we'd like to try to save it.
Okay. You're good?
Did we discuss whether it's been deemed unsafe?
Well, I did not ask that question. Had that property been deemed unsafe at some point?
So we did not ask for, Landon to come out yet to deem it unsafe. I didn't realize it was required. I thought that was only for the demolition one, so I apologize. If that
Well,
was
it's
something-
not required for this particular grant. There's some point value there, but if it hasn't been, it hasn't been, so
Okay, I mean, would it be helpful to table it for,
I don't think in your
Okay.
case, I think, in your
because
case.
you can see daylight through on the second story, but no one actually has come out to see it. I think
Okay.
based on the evidence from the photographs, it was already deemed to fall into the category. I'll make note of that for anything in the future.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, it's 10 points, but in the scheme of things.
Okay,
Yeah.
I take your word for it.
Okay, 614 East Main. Okay. We'll put that at the bottom, 707 Walnut Street.
Society Incorporated, Post Office Box 92, Madison.
Use this one again.
It's dangerous.
That's dilapidated. Yep. Tell us about that project, if you would.
It depends upon how much more you want to hear other than what's in the narrative. This is a structure that is significant not for its architectural characteristics, but because of its historical associations. This was not a project that we planned to get involved in, but when we learned of the historical association and the fact that it had already been approved for demolition, we were essentially forced to take action with very limited information. So the overall goal is to salvage the structure that has been neglected and allowed to deteriorate for many decades through many successive owners, and turn it into something worthwhile and something that will commemorate its history as part of the Georgetown district in Madison. So, actually, this is an example of a project that involves essentially every aspect of every type of historic preservation. It's part preservation, part restoration, part rehabilitation, and part reconstruction. And for what little amount of the original historic fabric that remains to work with, our goal is to try to retain and salvage and retain as much of that as possible. And anything that has to be replaced with new substitute materials will be as close to, will match as closely as possible the original appearance and characteristics as we can manage.
Is that on an alley, or is it strictly on the street?
It's not an alley, it's landlocked. In fact, one of the owners, one of the recent past owners actually divided the lot and kept the back part that does adjoin the alley. So what was left for us to purchase was only the house and enough land to contain it. So the lot does not even go from Walnut Street all the way back to the alley.
And I want to think that property hasn't had any occupants, official occupants, for quite some time.
I haven't tried to determine the last time it was actually occupied by human beings, but based on everything I can see inside, I don't see any sign of
occupation.
habitation since the 1980s. I don't know. I really don't know.
And once the project's done, what do you guys plan to do with it?
There's still a number of options under discussion. I mean, our initial thought in going into this project is making it essentially the second project in our revolving fund program. But in the meantime, I've had discussions with some of the staff at Ball State University about doing workshops in Madison again, as they used to in the past. So one possible thought, at least for the short term, would be to make it available as a scholars house or a meeting space for workshops and charrettes, not limited to Ball State, but for other organizations or institutions that might be interested in that type of activity. But we've not made any kind of commitment to that effect at this point. So our organization is not ideally a property owning and managing organization. If we don't find some short-term use for it like that, it would just be the second project in our revolving fund program, being rehabilitation, and then insert preservation covenants into the deed and sell it to a new owner for future use, whatever that might be.
And it had previously been deemed unsafe, had it not?
Well, Nicole could probably tell that. I mean, I know that it is.
I thought it had.
Yeah, a demolition order had even been issued
Yeah.
without review by the Historic District Board or anything. So I take that to mean that it was it was deemed unsafe.
Okay.
Will Cornerstone officially retain the ownership?
Not if we sell it.
I mean, you want to sell it? You
Well,
mentioned
as
a
I just
lot
said,
of
we
different.
haven't determined whether we will
Right.
simply treat this as another revolving fund project, meaning we do a rehabilitation and then sell it to somebody else at whatever point,
Right.
for whatever use they would choose to make of it. I do not envision keeping this as, for example, a meeting space or organizational headquarters for a long-term basis. So no, it would not be owner occupied
Right.
ideally,
Okay,
regardless of what future use we make of it.
thanks. I don't have any questions.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I would at least like to know whether the scoring meets the threshold requirement.
She'll go over all the scores here shortly.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep, that's, okay, 912 West Second Street.
No, we're back to rehab.
Do we have anybody hiding around the corner that we haven't heard from?
He came in after.
Newspaper. Okay, so, well, with that, we've got 4 or 5 that were not represented tonight. In its own way, that's a good thing.
Those, who were not represented, you have 2 options. You can deny their funding request because they did not attend per requirement, or you can table it to the next meeting.
Do we need a motion to table?
Do we have the opportunity to allow them to contact City Hall to request that they be tabled? Or is that overcomplicated?
I think it overcomplicates.
Okay.
I will tell you that all applicants were told multiple times about the meeting. I hand wrote it on every receipt.
Okay.
So worst case, they can reapply for the,
Yes.
I feel like we start,
I think you're right. I think that we're opening the genie's bottle there.
I mean, what is it? We're gonna copy their form, pay another $10.
Yeah.
I don't wanna table it.
Okay, so we have a motion to declare those ineligible for non-attendance.
I'll second that motion.
So Jim is making that motion.
Jim will make that
Okay,
motion.
I can make that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. While she's doing the scoring, I will mention that our rules, some of the rules, will be changing for the balance of 2023. Because these rules had not been reviewed prior to these applicants coming in, we continued to use the 2022 rules for this meeting. We will be reviewing the proposed rules here momentarily.
I'm ready with the scores. First application, 219 East Main Street, scored 41.67 out of 30. 212 East Street, scored 32.33 out of 30. 308 East 3rd Street, scored 31.33 out of 30. 223 West 1st Street, scored 38 out of 30.
Wait a minute. Okay,
Then we skip one.
what did it score?
38 out of 30.
Okay.
128 Mulberry Street, using the previous score of 37.2 out of 33. 752 Jefferson Street, using the previous score of 36.2 out of 30. 618 East 2nd Street, scored 36.67 out of 30. 523 to 525 West Street, scored 45.33 out of 33. 524 Walnut Street, using the previous score of 23.4 out of 21. 600 West 5th Street, scored 40.33 out of 33. 526 Walnut Street, scored 31.67 out of 33. 707 Walnut Street, scored 48 out of 33. I do have updated funding numbers for you, from your amendments. So your sheet is wrong. Available for this year, we have $385,111.47 available total. That breaks down to, the 25% category of $96,277.87. And the 75% category as $288,833.60.
And that does not include, as we discussed, county funding and
That is all funding that's already been committed, which does include the county funding.
Oh.
They are under an interlocal.
And our requested numbers are different as well, since we have several that didn't appear.
Not calculated that though. Probably do it really quick.
While she's calculating that, in answer to your question, 707 Walnut Street did in fact score well in excess of the required score.
The requested for the 25% category would be, $40,696.89. And then the 75% category, including the one who did not make the minimum, would be $132,823.11. Total request would be $173,520.
So we need to make a determination of our recommendation going forward to the board. We had one property that did not make the minimum score. So, I'm sorry? By 1 point. So I would entertain a motion from someone to recommend that we recommend to the board that they approve all qualifying scores. Or if somebody wants to make a different motion, we'll entertain that as well.
I'll make the motion that we, pass on the ones that qualified to the Board of Works.
Okay,
All
so
qualifying.
we have a motion to recommend to the Board of Public Works that they approve all qualifying scores.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. I don't believe so.
So you have a draft of the 2023 proposed changes for the guidelines and program. I also printed out a summary of the proposed changes, the highlights of the largest changes. For 2023, you've already approved the target areas, so thank you for that. But in addition to that change, one of the things that we would like the board to consider is adding a fourth grant category. This would be called the Curb Appeal Grant Program. Would be similar to the Rehabilitation Grant Program for downtown, but this would be for the Hilltop specifically. We would recommend a maximum grant matched at $5,000. This would include exterior work that is visible from the right-of-way, including exterior wall repairs, doors, windows, shutters, and other exterior elements, including lead-based paint testing and remediation.
Now, this grant would not, just for clarification, this grant would not require historic board approval?
Correct. It's would only be available for the Hilltop.
Okay.
And it has to be within the city limits, and it has to be visible from the right-of-way, which would, staff would likely determine.
And would we have a set amount? What would our set amount, what would our cap be for curb appeal grants?
Like number of grants?
Yes.
We had not talked about that, cause other grants are not capped at that. But we could look at, reallocating those percentages, like we have the 75% and the 25%, we could reformulate that to be a different percentage.
But as written, this would be part of the formula within the given 25, 75,
Yes.
since Pinehurst is a hilltop neighborhood.
Yes, correct. necessarily have to, vote on it today. I could, schedule an organizational meeting to do that. But given that our next grant deadline is February 6th, it'd be best if we move forward relatively quickly.
Do you want to take these items one by one, or?
I think that's the easiest.
Okay. Then I would move that we accept the addition of the curb appeal grant and make it part of the formula of the existing 25-75 split, at least for this year. And then if there's a need to refigure that next year, so be it.
Second.
In favor? Aye.
Aye.
The next biggest change is to the dangerous buildings grant. We've had a couple of applications for that grant previously, and we found a bit of clarification was needed on the infill construction. We've had a couple of grants get paid out who haven't completed their infill yet, and they've received their full disbursement. So to make our process at the city level for staff easier, we're proposing that the infill construction has to be completed within 2 years after the funding, and that final disbursement of funds would be withheld until that construction is completed. The infill construction is already a requirement of that grant, but this just clarifies that you're not going to get your full money until after you do that.
I'd make a motion that we approve the dangerous building time limit as stated.
Now second. All in favor?
Aye.
The next biggest proposal difference is for work beginning before the grant approval. These would be 2 exemptions, one for dilapidated structures and one for dangerous buildings. Specifically only for those that have been deemed unsafe by the building inspector. Given their unsafe nature, we would like the committee to allow for some work to start before the grant is awarded.
But all approvals from the city inspector would have to be done in
Yes, all other
advance.
permits would be required as already.
This is simply allowing them to begin with disposal of dangerous elements prior to the financial question.
Yes, correct.
I make the motion that we accept.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There's some other minute changes in the guidelines. Let me pull them up real quick. Those were the biggest changes. And I'm happy to answer any questions while I'm pulling it up. You have a red line version of the proposed full amendments in front of you. most of the other changes are just fixing wordage or, links that were that were incorrect. It probably wouldn't hurt to have a motion and vote to pass the 2023 amendments to the guidelines.
Nicole, do you have any idea what that scoring sheet would look like for the, curb appeal?
I haven't created it, to be completely honest, so I'll bring that to our next meeting. I also need to make some tweaks to the application form itself, so I will probably go ahead and work on scheduling an organizational meeting, so if you want to wait on the full book till then, I'm fine with that.
Our next meeting is when?
The next regular scheduled meeting is, March 14th. The next PACE deadline for applications is February 6th.
I saw very little in the red line that varied from what we've already passed. We've already touched on the things that I think would be significant to any applicant. But I do think an organizational meeting is probably advised prior to our next regular meeting.
I can do that. So look for an email from me tomorrow.
Anything else?
Nothing else on our agenda. I did want to touch a little bit on the Paul Brune grant that we were awarded. I'm working on those guidelines and application process to streamline and make sure that the processes are very separate from PACE. I think my recommendation to this committee is to form a subcommittee with one member representing the PACE committee on that subcommittee. Probably a committee of 3 is kind of what I'm thinking, if you're up for that.
And for clarification to our audience, that grant is the financial assistance grant
Yes.
for the applicant's match.
Yes, that's correct. And it has to, since it's from the National Park Service, it has other restrictions, such as having to meet the Secretary of Interior standards, having to be contributing to the district. So that's why it's taking me a little bit longer to create that program. But I do think it's best to pull out of the main PACE agenda and maybe make a subcommittee to review those applications, since it's going to be a little more extensive.
And I would imagine there'll be some privacy concerns
Yes.
on those applications as well. So, okay. All right. With that, I think I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Our next regular meeting is on March 14th here at City Hall at 5:30. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.